Hi, everybody. Welcome to BRITE Connections. I'm Victoria Sayeg. I'm the Director of Performing Arts and Project Coordinator for BRITE. So for anybody new to BRITE, we are a wonderful nonprofit based out of Ventura, California, focused on mental health and well-being through performance and the arts. Our mission is to support youth between the ages of 12 and 25 by helping to amplify their voices around issues that they care about. BRITE is made possible through funding from Ventura County Behavioral Health Department, Substance Use Services, and Prevention. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm really looking forward to spending the hour with you all. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation with a panel of experts about going back to school during COVID. Last week, I had the opportunity and pleasure of interviewing students in our community from first grade through college about their anxieties and thoughts and fears around starting virtual learning. We cut together a 10-minute video with interview highlights and released that video last week. If you missed the video, don't worry. We will be summarizing segments of the video for talking points and addressing other concerns as well. Another thing we're going to do tonight is be fielding live questions. So if you're watching and if you're able, we encourage you to ask questions and comment right here on this live video. As a general rule, the sooner you get those questions in, the better, but we will be fielding questions the whole hour. Okay, so who is we? It's my pleasure to introduce our three panelists tonight, one at a time. I would like to introduce first Evan Simmons. Evan is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has worked with children, teens, young adults, and families in Los Angeles and Ventura County for the past 10 years. He specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy and utilizes other therapeutic modalities to address various mental health concerns. Hi, Evan.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I would like to introduce Todd Walker. Todd is a licensed clinical social worker. He is the Chief Clinical Officer and co-founder of Alba Walker Life Strategies, where he oversees 3 sites, 40 clinicians, and provides services to LA, Ventura, and Kern counties. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And last but not least, I would love to introduce Amy Jones-Brink. Amy is the Director of Community Services for the City of Agora Hills. She has been with the city for 25 years, overseeing the parks, recreation, and community services of Agora. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited to sit down and have this conversation with you all. This conversation around going back to school in the time of COVID. But I guess we can kick off our discussion with the thought, is it okay? Is it okay to talk about the pandemic and COVID with youth and with the children in our community, our own children or otherwise? Todd, I think you would like to speak to that point.
Yeah, sure, Victoria. I think it's actually a great opportunity to talk with kids of all ages. I think often as adults and parents, even teachers, we get concerned about whether or not it's appropriate to bring up discussions around the pandemic. And I think most importantly is asking open-ended questions and allowing kids to take the conversation from there. So if you say something to, an elementary age school child around an open-ended question such as, hey, what do you think the pandemic is? What does it look like for you? And just allowing the child to guide the conversation. It can be really interesting to hear what their point of view is. And I think we definitely saw that in the video that was shared last week.
Thank you, Todd. Very eloquent. Thank you for giving us the okay to talk about it. I know for me, I kind of need it to just be able to engage in that conversation. Evan, I know you work with youth in our community. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I just kind of want to add kind of to what Todd is saying. It's also having the recognition that just with other various forms of trauma, it is very important to kind of keep an open line of communication. And so sometimes your kid may not be running to you to talk about things that are going on. And like Todd said, you may have to present those open-ended questions. But I think it's also very important to remember that, especially during this pandemic and during right now, there's also very large discussions around race relations and a lot of other social issues that are going on that parents are also having to kind of field questions about. And so it's also important to remember as parents to have a sense of humility and not knowing that, you might not have all the answers, but as long as you're open to learning and kind of presenting that information along with your kids as, hey, I am learning this too. You're not alone. I'm trying to kind of understand and be better or grow, whatever it might be. It is really important, like Todd said, to come from a place of being open-minded, but also to being humble. We don't always know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. And for a lot of these kids, they are getting so much information because now their learning's on the screen, their friends or the social connections are through a screen. And so it really is important to kind of even have family check-ins just to kind of see where everybody is at, and knowing that not having all the answers is okay.
I think to piggyback off what Evan shared as well, I think it's a great opportunity for adults to model that we have feelings as well. I think there's often an impression from kids that we don't get scared or sad or have anger about situations. And I think it's a great opportunity to also model, while we're asking our kids to share how they feel about the pandemic, how can we as adults also share what it's like to go back to school in this current situation? And again, just always giving that reminder of being age appropriate. We're going to talk very differently to a 5-year-old and 10-year-old as we would to a 16-year-old or 18-year-old, so on and so forth.
Well said. Thank you. I like the reminder, Evan, to be humble. That's important. Amy, I see you're lighting up here. Did you have something to add?
Sorry, I had to move around my screen a little bit. No, I don't have any, I don't have anything from, definitely from a professional standpoint. I think as somebody who's actively engaged in the community and who works with a variety of age groups, I think it's important to lean into the pandemic and to accept it and to be willing to be flexible and change your activities. This has been with us for several months. It's going to be with us for a while. So I think that we have to be ready we've had to be adaptable and flexible. And I think we have to continue to be like that. And I think we have to continue to look at new ways of doing things and consider activities and things that we didn't do before. We have to lean into it and look at it at a different point of view.
Well said. And don't go anywhere because I have a question. Oh, you went somewhere because I have a question for you. You said we're going to experience this for months in the future, which I have talked to you about previously. And you had some ideas around the holidays, like Halloween. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I think that, right now the county health order, while it's a really big health order and it's really difficult for people to understand, I think that one of the concepts around it is the idea of group gathering and being around multiple households. So everything as we enter into the holiday time, as we enter into fall, that has a lot of holidays, I think it's going to be hard for us as a community to wrap our heads around the idea of not being able to go trick-or-treating, the idea of maybe not being able to sit down at a Thanksgiving table with our friends and family, and maybe not even seeing any holiday parties. Somebody said to me the other day that they had just like a really harsh reality of a thought where they said, we probably are not going to see any holiday parties. And I think that the county health department has made it very clear that those large group gatherings are not something that are going to come back anytime soon. So we're going to have to really readjust the way we celebrate holidays, like Halloween. So maybe we and our children are not going door to door trick or treating, but maybe adults and the older empty nesters in the community can drive around the neighborhood and hand out candy to the kids while they stand on their front porch and say hello as they drive by. So those of us who plan community events have been rethinking community events for several months now. And I think we're coming up with some kind of creative, innovative ideas. And we hope that people will just be accepting and adaptable and flexible as we start to roll those out.
Thank you, Amy. I know I kind of jumped to Halloween before we even talked about school, but I love Halloween. Can you blame me?
I know. No, can't blame you.
Todd, I know you have stuff to add about this topic.
Sure. It's funny, and I love what Amy said just about the holidays are upon us. I mean, it's hysterical how time is just flying right now. I hear from many people, the days are blurring together. And, you know, it's evident when we stop and think about it, Halloween is pretty much about 2 months away, which sounds like a long time, but we're going to blink and it's going to be here. So, you know, I think one of the ideas that I would suggest to folks is how to kind of reinvent the holidays, you know, around what Amy was saying. And, you know, I have a client that I'm working with currently, and he and his family are actually talking about turning their home into a haunted house and making just kind of an internal family project of like each of the kids having the ability to decorate a space in the home and just again get creative, because it is going to be somewhat different, but at the same time different can also be exciting. I'm seeing a lot of, you know, communities in the Thousand Oaks area that are talking about different ideas such as like decorating contests and things like that, that, you know, in a way, to Amy's point, abide by the county guidelines that we are expected to follow at this time. So that's what I would encourage a lot of kids and parents to do right now, is just kind of reinvent how we can do the holidays, because they're going to be here sooner than we think.
Well said. Thank you, Todd. So now I'm going to jump gears back to school because I just needed to talk about Halloween for some reason. So I know, right? So we talked to many students, but we pulled 10 clips that I thought were very poignant concerns that we're hearing youth vocalize. And the word boring came up time in and time out. A lot of the clips made the cut, but some didn't. Almost everyone I talked to used the word boring to describe online learning and virtual learning. Can anyone speak to that valid, in my opinion, valid feeling, and a little bit more thoroughly on the subject?
Why not? I'll jump right in.
Thank you, Evan.
No problem. No, I think honestly it's funny because, and I say funny in the sense of piggyback off your Halloween discussion, that's why this next statement is kind of funny. I think similarly, we do want to approach the I'm bored statement from a very similar standpoint as you would the holidays. You know, we are all having to relearn how to do a lot of things within the confines of our own homes, and how to do things with the immediate family or the individuals that are closest to us, you know, within arm's reach. And so there is a lot of reinventing, even as we go back to school, as far as how to just be not bored. And so for some, they're able to tap into their creative abilities. For others, it's music or science, whatever it might be, video games. But I think one of the things that's most important to remember is it's not going to be cookie cutter for everybody. You know, not everybody's interest is going to be the same. And so you may have some individuals who will play video games for 3 weeks straight, and that seems to be the only thing they're really interested in. And you might notice also like, I'm bored, there's nothing to do. Well, the reality is because for so long, there really hasn't been much non-technological, you know, things to do. You know, things have been through the computer, video games. There hasn't been much of the in-person social interaction. And so I think, kind of going back to what Todd mentioned earlier, it's modeling new things to do. So when your kid does say, I'm bored, instead of just kind of saying, all right, we'll go figure it out, you know, being open to have a conversation of like, okay, well, let's think of some things together. And granted, I feel for parents because right now you are a teacher, you are a parent, you have so many caps on right now. And so there may not be the time and space to be able to brainstorm together. But I think one of the things you can do is say, hey, I'm busy right now, but why don't you go create a list of things that you think you could do? I will kind of start to think of some things on my own, and then make a very kind of plan set time where you guys can come together and see what is available. Because in everybody's household, that might look different as well. And so for some, baking together or cooking a meal, that can help mix up the boredom. And so it doesn't have to be something done every day, but rather something that you or your kid can do together or individually, but doesn't have to be just kind of on their own to think about it. It can be something that you guys develop and think about together as a family.
I love your suggestions.
Sorry, Victoria. I think also, just to jump off what Evan is saying, I think what's important too is unpacking the word bored as far as like, what do they actually mean by it? Because often we make a lot of blanket statements, and, you know, to simply say I'm bored, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think, especially as a parent, as a teacher, it's a great question to ask kids. And I think, again, engaging in conversation as far as what are some things that could be happening, or what is something that you wish you could be doing. A lot of times, you know, we're engaging kids right now and also talking about what they could be doing post-pandemic. And while we know that that is going to be quite some time away, I think one of the things that's special about this time is it's giving us an opportunity to really look at what we actually love to do, and what we're actually into. And at the same time, pushing comfort zones. You know, I for myself, unfortunately, one of the things that happened to me this summer is my husband broke his wrist, and I have had to learn how to cook, literally. I am not someone who cooks. I don't, you know, barbecuing chicken is about the extent of my chef abilities. But, you know, again, in a positive way, it is it's pushed myself to have to learn how to do things that I haven't had to do before necessarily. So in a good way, there are positive things that are coming out of this pandemic, and that it's forcing us to kind of try things we haven't had to do before. I think definitely one of the things I've enjoyed seeing for sure is I'm starting to see a lot of kids I work with that are not into technology, in the sense of like they do school all day and they actually want to break from it, which in all seriousness, I think is a huge positive, because prior to the pandemic, we saw a lot of technology usage. So it's kind of nice to see some of the engagement with families. And, you know, I always remember pre-pandemic, I'd go to dinner and you'd see the table next to you and like the whole family all had their iPhones out or their iPads, where like it's actually nice to be able to have conversations with family members in the home and discuss how their days are and so on and so forth. And it's going back to what we've already been talking about, it's such a wonderful time to also talk about feelings. I think, you know, we're back to a bit of a roller coaster right now, because I think we were very hopeful at this time we'd be out of the pandemic, or at least back in school in some shape or form. So we are seeing more people step back into kind of that opportunity we were in several months ago, where we're struggling to understand, why am I not back in school? And I think, you know, going back to the holidays, it's definitely something that, especially for kids, this is going to be very different, in the sense that I think in spring, because there aren't typically a lot of holidays obviously attached to spring, there wasn't as much understanding. Where one of the things that I've been talking about with kids I work with and families is even just things as basic as, is there going to be a pumpkin patch this year? You know, and what is that going to look like? So, you know, definitely the dialogue is very worthwhile right now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and I apologize, Victoria, if this is kind of jumping to a question you might get to in the near future, but I think this also speaks to the idea of being productive. And so I know, you know, often during this pandemic, there's been this idea that, you know, we have so much more free time, we should be productive. And, you know, we have all this freedom to be creative or to think of new hobbies and all these things. And so therefore, we should be filling every moment with something. And I think it's just as important now that kids are going back to school to remember that same exact thing, that even though their education style and the way they are learning right now is different, it still doesn't necessarily mean that they have all day, every day, just kind of free to do everything, you know? And so even, you know, for kids and parents, it's important to kind of check yourself a little bit and really recognize that if for whatever reason a virtual class ends a half hour early, yes, it would be great if your kid had the work ethic to start studying ahead or doing their homework and all of those things. But you know what, they may actually just need a break, because if they were at school, they'd be twiddling their thumbs, spinning their pencil, you know, talking to their friends more often than not in that same time frame. And so I think it speaks to that piece of being flexible that we keep talking about, that kind of theme of really, as hard as it is, being able to kind of set boundaries, but roll with the punches and recognize that what we hope or think is going to be best may not be best in that moment. And it's okay to adapt and change, especially when your kids do start to speak up and say, I don't like this, or this is tough, whatever it might be, or even just, get off my back. Really being able to kind of take that as, hey, they're feeling something, without just assuming you know exactly what it is.
No, and I really like how Todd said that you have to, I think it's important to ask kids what they mean by bored. Because what bored means to them might not be the same meaning to us, right? So they could be bored with we were just chatting before we went live tonight about, they could be bored with their visual surroundings of, you know, being online and staring at this gray computer all day, like with, you know, Todd and Evan and I were saying, like with the white background. So maybe take a few minutes to, you know, kind of, you know, spruce up your background, or make it fun, or make it be about you and make it speak to you, right? Because I think that you want to connect with teachers and you want to connect with friends, right? So make that background be about you, and make it kind of fun. And it might be an easier way to connect with your teacher or to connect with your kid, your friends online. And I think, you know, if they're bored with, kind of to Evan's point, and this is something that we've been actually spending, you know, the past month or so working on over at the City of Agora Hills in the Department of Community Services. We're actually getting ready to launch a pretty robust virtual online program starting a week from Monday, or excuse me, Tuesday, because of the Labor Day holiday. But it kind of talks to that, your point, Evan, about, you know, the attention span and that you're on the computer all day and you might end early. So the concept that we came up with is we're going to have a virtual platform where students, children, elementary kids can log in. It's a subscription service, and we'll provide that information. Hopefully, Victoria, we can get it posted after the show so if people are interested in it. But the idea is that you can hop on anytime between like 9 or 10 in the morning and 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And there's little 25-minute snippets of things, like there might be a 25-minute art class or a 25-minute Spanish class or a karate class or a video on, you know, how they run the watershed down in the Las Virgenes Creek, like all kinds of just fun, interactive videos with instructors, and then maybe just straight up, you know, PSAs for local nonprofits, because we recognize that when children are on distance learning from 8 o'clock in the morning till sometimes 2 or 3, they get tired, they get bored, hard to keep their attention, and they need something fun, but they don't need something else that's going to be another hour or 2. So 25 minutes is where we're at. So, but it's a good thing to circle back with them and ask them exactly what does bored mean to them. I think that's a really good point.
Thank you. I want to take all those things you just explained. Can I sign up?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Really well said. So the productivity and the boredness and the screen looking at is one thing I'm hearing a lot. I also hear, especially from Caden, a young man I interviewed, 12 years old, he mentioned confusing a couple times, that online learning felt confusing. Would any of our panelists like to speak to that, to why it could be confusing and how to maybe unconfuse?
I think we all nod our heads.
I know. Go ahead, Evan. You start. I'll jump in after you.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, I think with that, I think like for any of us, things that are new can be confusing, you know, and with the uncertainty of the pandemic, that in itself is confusing. I think oftentimes though, when I hear that coming from kids, learning the virtual platform that they're learning is based off of, sometimes it isn't so much a technical issue that's confusing. Sometimes it is speaking more to maybe underlying learning differences. So for some individuals, so for instance, if they're learning math, and if they're learning it through videos that have been pre-recorded by their teacher, and it's just the teacher kind of going, okay, you do this, 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 and this, and that's not the way the kid learns best, they might be an individual who might start saying, I don't understand, this is confusing, or I don't know what they're saying. And I use math as an example, but it could be for English, it could be for any other class, because it is such a different platform, and there is a level of interpersonal connection that you get from being face-to-face with a teacher that I think a lot of kids are having a hard time reading and kind of feeling out through this kind of virtual platform. I think the number one thing that as soon as school started, even before school started, majority of my middle school and high school students would talk about was this fear of not being able to get an understanding of who their teachers are or how their teachers work. And it created this anxiety of, but if I don't know how they grade, or if I don't know what they think is funny or not funny, what am I going to do? And I think just it comes to this like full circle where the confusion may not necessarily even be about the academics. It very well could be little bits along the way that cumulatively are creating a sense of just overwhelming feeling of there's so much, and I know how to do some of it, but I don't know how to handle all of this together.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to what Evan said regarding, you know, again, unpacking that word confusing, very similar to how we talked about bored. You know, what does confusing look like for the student? And most importantly, you know, I think we do have to remember being on Zoom or whatever platform is being utilized by the school is intimidating. And one of the things I would encourage students to do is make sure that you're logging on a few minutes before. making sure things just as basic as like, is your computer on? Is your power cord plugged in? Is your Wi-Fi working? Are you already logged on to the page that the teacher is going to be utilizing? Because again, it can be extremely intimidating when you're pulled into a classroom and then all of a sudden it appears that all the students have been there, they're already ready to go, you're trying to catch up. And again, that can just create a lot of confusion as far as, I'm trying to get my system to work. I know even a week ago, I believe it was LA Unified, that there was a crash on Zoom. So even something like that is going to be very stressful for a student, just because, especially if they're wanting to be present, they're wanting to be available for the lecture that they're going to be receiving. So I think it's just important about how can we plan ahead? How can we also, while the school year in many districts has already executed, how can we make sure to talk to kids about what to do in some of those stressful situations? One recommendation I'd give to parents is doing a little cheat sheet next to the student's computer or iPad, whatever it is they're using, for like 3 things they can do to be ready for, if Zoom crashes. A lot of things, we often see is that all of a sudden the video will freeze. So, counting to 10 before going to seek a parent, or, just because again, it is intimidating, and we're, expecting kids to kind of know what to do in these situations. And it's new. It's, while they have about 3 months of experience from the end of the school year last year, I think it's still important that we still have those conversations. We can't expect that they just know what they're doing. So.
Thank you, Todd. I think this segues into a question we got on Facebook Live in the comments. Christy says, what do you suggest for parents to do when they notice their child is struggling in a lesson? In most cases, the parent wouldn't be at school when a kid is struggling or frustrated.
Todd, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. I think, it's a great opportunity that, to me, luckily, not only am I married to a first grade teacher, but my mom was also a kindergarten teacher as well. So I've got great resources. I think in a experience like that, it's a great opportunity to give a cue for the student to take a break. I think that again, we have to remember that the school year literally just started. And I think that especially these are things that teachers watch out for, that obviously during this setting, it's a little more difficult for teachers to see all of their students on Zoom or whatever platform they're using. So, I think doing things where students can simply take, a 1-minute break, a 2-minute break, even just getting up and something as basic as doing like 10 jumping jacks, and even a parent modeling that, is a great thing just to break up the session, especially because we have to stop and think about the amount of time that students are spending just sitting in front of computers. I think another thing is, parents, reach out to teachers. If you're seeing certain behaviors that are going on, or that your child is struggling to sit for a lesson, give that feedback to the teacher, because in a lot of ways, teachers may not necessarily know. So I think it's a great opportunity to provide some of that feedback to teachers if you see there is an ongoing pattern to what's going on during the day, during the school day.
And I think to add to that, I think another thing to kind of it's not necessarily modeling, but it can be a modeling tool, is as a parent really kind of tracking some of these things behind the scenes. So if you notice that it's happened, once or twice a week, I think for any of us, we can go to the place of, oh, this happens all the time, and go to that kind of all or none thinking. So it would be important as a parent to really even just kind of write down and keep a journal of what you're noticing, kind of take some notes, because as a parent, it can be extremely overwhelming when all of a sudden you start to see things that you didn't notice about your child before. And as Todd said, like, you definitely want to reach out to the teachers and kind of bridge that gap in the communication. But I think also too, have some compassion as a parent yourself, and know that it doesn't mean the world is over. You're just kind of noticing some things that are different. And if you're able to kind of take notes, it may be something that after a week, and because of the change in the transition, it might be gone. And so that way, as you're kind of inquiring and you are coming from that place of just wanting to understand, you also can kind of take some deep breaths yourselves and really lean into the moment as, hey, you're getting to know a new side of your kid, and almost look at it as, all right, I would have not been able to have this time and opportunity. And so I know quite often as therapists, we talk about gratitude. that would be a perfect time to model and practice gratitude of, wow, like I'm so glad you felt comfortable to speak up and say something. Or if it is just more of a visual behavioral thing that you're noticing, to be able to say that, like, hey, I really noticed that it seems like you're struggling. Like, is that the case? And I know we've been talking about this, it's coming from that place of curiosity, but also just knowing that something that may seem like something may not, and vice versa.
I think also, and Evan, you just cued something for me, praise. It's a great opportunity to praise kids. We can't necessarily expect, just because of how this platform is, praise may look different from the teacher's view, in the sense that, in the classroom setting, it's very easy for teachers to be able to praise students throughout the day, throughout lessons and activities, where on Zoom, it's a different platform. There isn't the same type of contact in classroom. So, it's a great opportunity for parents that, if you see that, your child is doing a great job on a lesson, or they're participating, or they're doing whatever that is the expectation from the teacher, it's also a wonderful opportunity to praise that, and praise the having to sit in front of a computer, and how proud you are of them, and how, if they completed an assignment, that they did such a great job. And because again, just as we're getting used to it, they're getting used to it as well.
Okay, so can I chime in as a parent? Thank you for the professional advice. But as a parent, I definitely went through it with my daughter, and the advice that Evan and Todd just gave was spot on, because when she would be working on her classwork, if I looked over and saw her struggling or getting frustrated, I would tell her to close the computer, put it down for a few minutes and go take a walk outside, get your vitamin D, go out and get some sun and regroup and get a little re-energized. I also found it helpful I kind of kept her, her drawing pad, and actually she's got a little bag of like knitting and embroidery that she does. We kind of kept that close, so that if she did get frustrated and was tired or just, overworked at that moment, close the computer. Obviously, if they're on Zoom with the teacher and they can't just get up and close the computer, you want to do that. But if they're working on homework and they're frustrated, I completely agree and support that. Get up and walk around for 10 minutes. It's the bathroom break in class, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not being shamed for it. They're not getting in trouble for asking to go to the bathroom. But that's what it is. Get up and walk outside and get some fresh air, and you'll feel a lot better.
I think another thing that, just you're making me think of, Amy, is lunch with the family. One of the things I said when this pandemic started is, like, seriously, when was the last time, Monday through Friday, that any of us got to sit down and have lunch as a family? Mm-hmm. And, I think that's a great incentive. It's something that, you can really create special moments, especially for kids, as far as how to plan ahead for the week, planning special meals that maybe the kids help create. And for parents, at the same time that you're also working, and many of you are working, how, if it is possible, how to set your lunch break at the same time as your kids. That way there is kind of a special time and an ability for everybody to maybe take 20 minutes for lunch and then go take a 10-minute walk or a 20-minute walk outside, just because, it's incredible how much sitting that many of us are now accustomed to doing. And, that movement is huge, especially throughout the day. So it's a great way to incentivize kids as far as, like, getting special snacks throughout the day, and really using it as an opportunity to say, hey, if you get through this math lesson, we can have a special treat after it's done. So it can also incentivize them to participate in the lesson, and so on and so forth. So.
Thank you. Well said. And your suggestion of praising, I want to praise all of you for being here with us today. Thank you. You're amazing. We have a question in the comments from Loren. It says, do you think it would be helpful to limit screen time outside of school during the week to lessen a child's fatigue when it comes to online learning?
I guess I'll kind of jump off of that one. I think, if I'm being fully honest, it really is going to depend on each kid as an individual and your household. Because I can speak to just even right now, I have 3 or 4 different discussions on the same topic happening with 3 or 4 various families, where, for some, it is something that's where the main social interaction is really happening. And so really incorporating that time into the day is important to have, so there's that sense of balance. And so with that being said, it's not, okay, if school ends at 3, you have from 3 to 11 p.m., but I think it is worthwhile to really kind of consider, you know, if your kid was playing a team sport right now, that would be an hour or two of social interaction they would be getting that we kind of have to modify and shift to change given the parameters of the pandemic right now. Same thing if they have any sort of extracurriculars. So it is important to kind of recognize that because some of the in-person stuff isn't available, that some of the social interaction might not just be through video games, it may be through some of the stuff Amy is talking about with the City of Agora, where it's an online platform that is unfortunately like through a screen, but also on the flip side, very beneficial because they're already kind of used to it, you know, and that is a way for them to seamlessly roll into an after-school activity without having to without having to worry too much. So I think when it comes to like limiting screens as a whole, or even just adjusting screen time, it is important to look at it as a family. Okay, you know, where does my kid socialize? How much time is spent doing schoolwork and doing academic work? How much time is done exploring YouTube and going down the rabbit hole? But really just kind of doing an inventory together, you know, coming together and saying, okay, I totally get it. You're in school for these hours. Help me understand a little bit as far as what you're doing outside of the school time so I can best help you manage your time throughout the day, and we can really accommodate for family dinner or extra homework or some other activity that might need to be done, whether for the individual or the family.
Thank you. I've now learned how to mute and unmute myself 30 minutes into this. Thank you. We have another question from Renee. Renee wants to know if she can get a professional opinion on how you guys feel about reframing a basic chore or activity as a fun term, like getting some vitamin D instead of go outside. She says, I ask because I think it might give more motivation or encouragement.
Go ahead, Todd, and then I'll definitely go off on this one.
Okay, sounds thanks, Evan. Let's see. You know, Victoria, would you mind one more time reframing a chore as? Would you mind giving the question one more time? I want to make sure I have it.
It says how they feel about reframing a basic chore or activity as a fun term, like getting some vitamin D instead of go outside. I ask because I think it might give more motivation or encouragement. Okay.
I mean, it's one of those things. What comes to my mind is like, it depends on the chore. As terrible as that sounds, but I think that, you know, what I think of is structure in the day. And, you know, right now, I think when we're talking about chores, I do still think it is important that chores are done. I think that, you know, it is definitely an opportunity to model what chores can look like in the household, especially because now, in a way, we've gained a lot of time back. So like, you know, I can just think of like when I, you know, previously had to drive to an office, you know, I no longer have to do that anymore. And really, in a lot of ways, the same thing goes for kids. So I think any sense of a reframe is always positive. Getting outside, I mean, obviously the past few weeks, as we know, has been quite warm. But I think it's a great opportunity to talk with kids about what that looks like. And, you know, chores are complicated. I mean, you know, and understanding the purpose of them. And I think it goes back to a lot of what we've talked about today is dialogue and communication and what chores look like, why they need to be done, and how can they be defined by kids? Because, you know, often, and I mean, this is an ongoing discussion with all of my teenagers that I work with. Sometimes they kind of just need to understand, you know, the who, what, where, when, why, how piece of chores. So, you know, one of the things even I remember as a kid, you know, I wanted to actually just complete stuff without my parents having to tell me. And I got very frustrated when, like, I can remember in high school, my mom would ask me to dry the dishes constantly. And like, I was literally walking to the kitchen to dry the dishes, but then I would get super frustrated because I wanted to be able to like prove to my mom that I was capable of drying dishes. So to me, it goes back to, I think, you know, almost like I would suggest a family meeting and being able to talk about what are the I would call them things that need to be done around the house as opposed to chores, just because I think chores just has sometimes with a lot of the teenagers I've worked with, it has a negative connotation to it. So, that's something that I would look at is just how can we reframe that into something that's positive, but also that everyone participates. I think often we discount that younger kids can't participate in some of these activities that have to be done around the house. So I think that's also an opportunity of how to engage younger kids. Can a 5-year-old necessarily take the garbage cans out? Probably not the best plan, but can they assist with like walking dishes from the table to the kitchen, things like that. So Evan, what else you got on that?
Wasn't that, I think I love the idea of reframing things as a whole. And so I think, like you said, it is a piece of picking and choosing what you're reframing. But I also think with that, it's just like a couple of other things, it's redefining. So redefining what is a chore versus part of family responsibility and being an active member in the family. So kind of like Todd was just touching on, but also similarly, kind of as you would help redefine wants versus needs. So even in these discussions, they don't have to be sit down hour-long discussions, but you really can reframe things to, getting outside and getting exercise and getting fresh air, that really shouldn't be a chore. That's part of a daily, just balanced kind of lifestyle. And so it's being able to have that real world kind of discussion just about that piece of it. But I also think it is very important to then reframe things that are going to be more negative and look at, okay, is incentives a thing to use in this point in time? So for the kid who is, let's say, 5 years old, maybe the chore chart does have something like, did you pull your blankets over your pillow and make your bed? And so it's being flexible and together, like Todd mentioned, creating things and framing things that have a positive connotation, but also are very clear when it's a family responsibility. So as much as I may hate taking the trash cans out to the curb, and I may hate having to remember to bring them back in, and I might complain every week, that is something that as your kids, especially into high school, it's important to remind them that, hey, this is part of that independent learning. It doesn't have to turn into a lecture. It's more of, I get it, like it sucks, you don't like it, but we as a family each have our role when it comes to a rotating chore chart or when it comes to some sort of responsibility. And so really being able to kind of also make some blanket statements that are, hey, like some things are negotiable, but also too, like, we don't have to have chores be chores. They can be fun. Let's do them together, whether it is washing the dishes, washing a car, vacuuming, whatever it might be. It is reframing things as to it can be a joint fun activity in that way. And for the little ones, you can make it a game. So if it is vacuuming, throw confetti on your carpet. I know you parents are going to hate me for saying this, but throw a ton of confetti on the carpet, give your kid the vacuum and see how much they can clean up. So for the younger kids, definitely getting creative at the same time, because you may have to make a mess to get it clean.
I remember when I was a kid, that totally reminds me of something, Evan. We had a tree, a massive tree in our backyard. And I'm technically one of 5 boys, but growing up it was one of 4. And my mom said to us, like, it was like a couple of days a week, we had to go into the backyard and each pick up 10 leaves. So like, they're fun activities that, again, it's just how you model it. But it's definitely something you can do as far as like, I mean, I'm sure my brothers and I did it. I just can't remember, but like we probably competed on who got the biggest leaves. I mean, there are things you can do like that just make it fun for kids to be able to participate.
I was going to ask you guys, what do you think about the whole idea of maybe kind of what Evan was saying, put the chores out there and letting the kids select what they want to do rather than us as parents telling them what we want them to do? Because then is there a sense of maybe ownership on their part that they get to pick what they want to do? And then the whole thought of that they're contributing to, this family community, so to speak. So it's funny because I think we've been in this for so long, I'm starting to feel like we're just a bunch of roommates, right? And we're all contributing to the house functioning. So I wonder, what do you think about that? Is that a way that you could approach it as opposed to like some chart that you have to check off? I mean, I guess with the younger ones, you might need a chart. It might be helpful and fun for them. But as you get older, there's a concept of, right, letting them pick what they want to do and make them feel like they're contributing and a part of the success around here.
Well, exactly. And I think one of the things that for most of us, who do work with kids, I think sometimes when we make this comment to parents, that it's almost like we're teaching parents how to be manipulative, but we're really not. It's really helping them to initiate change. But we often will tell them, hey, give your kid 3 things that you want them to do and let them pick from those 3 things. So no matter what age, you can still do that same thing, because no matter what, they're going to be doing 1 or 2 of the 3 things you came up with and presented anyways. But you are giving that sense of ownership, that sense of control of, okay, this is one that I'm choosing to do, and I may not want to do any of them, but if I am, this is what I've chosen. And so you can also kind of implement that as well, where it is that piece of, yeah, is cleaning your room something that is going to affect the whole household? Maybe, maybe not. I know many parents will argue that, but like, and it's funny because like I have to like reference just like social media. Is like somebody just posted something a couple of days ago, but it was a video of a kid just kind of mocking the idea of like when we had, or used to rather, more so in the past pre-pandemic, have parents come over or have friends come over. Parents would always say, make sure your room's clean, make sure your room's clean, as if every person who comes to our houses runs immediately up to the kid's room to make sure it's clean. You know, it just doesn't happen. So like with that reality, it's also as parents knowing that that might be something that you leave up to them to kind of like negotiate, like, okay, my room might be my clean, not your clean, but I also won't have trash and litter and all these things in here that might create, you know, bugs and other issues as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a great idea, Amy, what you shared, because I can remember as a kid, and I don't know why, and it's totally transferred into adulthood. I love vacuuming. I literally, don't ask me why, but like sign me up, I will vacuum all day long. So I think things like that, it's great. It's a great opportunity to let kids kind of pick and choose a little bit. You know, there are things around the house for myself as an adult, like I refuse to do vacuuming all day long, not a problem. But like, you know, and giving some of that voice and choice can be really beneficial to let
Voice and
kids
choice.
engage, you know, and the hard part, you know, it's funny, but like, I think kids actually want to kind of get into some of this stuff. And I think it's great opportunities to show them how to do it. And just, especially for parents, you know, in a really positive way, get some help, you know, in the sense that kids can participate, you know, they can be helpful. So
Todd, you're coming to vacuum all of our houses? Is that what I got out of it?
Yeah. Evan, don't push it. I have an expensive rate, so.
I love vacuuming too. I would rather vacuum than unload the dishwasher. That
we
is
are all
for
going to
sure.
talk after this. We are going to have a discussion. We're going to trade chores amongst ourselves professionally.
But Evan, I really quick, and I don't, we might not need to digress on this, but you and I talked years ago about that whole concept of cleaning a clean bedroom, because don't let that secret out, because yes, we do hold that over children, that people are coming over and your room better be clean. So I don't want that to be out there in any other form, because I still use that. But I remember, and I don't know if it was you that told me or if it was somebody else in your practice that had said, tell your child to go clean their room the way they think it should be and the way it's clean, and then invite you as the parent to come in and look at it and come to an agreement on that's the best they can do. And we as parents have to accept that, right? So the bed might not be perfectly made, the pillows might not be perfectly propped, there might be a little laundry over here. Like, match expectations with cleaning that room, right? Do you remember that conversation? Because I thought that
100%.
was so great when you, that was life-changing for me when you told me about that.
Well, 100%, because it's like the idea, like I know my space can be cluttered filled, but I will find that paper clip from 3 weeks ago by the foot of the desk, by some sort of nut and bolt in the back corner, because I know my space. And I think for a lot of kids and even young adults, especially who have come back home to live with their parents, there has been a lot more of that, of feelings are kind of coming out in ways that are more behavioral. And so there might be more clutter, but that clutter may actually create a sense of security and safety for some individuals. And so, yeah, kind of come in and go like, hey, show me you're clean. And then 100% stepping in and going with, yes, this is clean. However, the 2-liter bottle of soda, the plate from last week's dinner, that's not clean. That needs to go out. And that way, again, it's not a fight, but it's just more about the piece of, hey, I now understand you, and now you can understand me, and let's work together on this. And it may not be perfect the first time, but over time, there's nothing to say that their version of cleaning doesn't morph into your version of cleaning. Because I've even found myself as an adult, and I cringe every time this happened. But I remember, like, so often my mom would clean before she would ask us to help her clean. And I'd always be like, but why? You're going to make me do this anyways. Like, what's going on? And the same kind of thing where I'm just like, all right, I'm going to do the dishes tomorrow. And all I've pre-soaked, pre-washed. I'm like, oh, I might as well have just done the dishes today. And so there's that understanding that they're probably going to turn more into you in some way anyways, but it's being open to kind of modeling and showing them how it can be without forcing it down their throat.
Really well said, guys. And now I have a strong urge to vacuum my floor. We have another question from Loren, and I do think this is a very critical point to touch on. Loren says there are a few scenarios where both parents must leave the house for work and the student is independent to carry on their learning alone. Is there any advice you'd give to the student to help them manage taking on learning alone and how to structure their day?
Okay, so yes, 100%. I think my pause and my smile is coming from the place of whereas not knowing kind of where the question is coming from, if you will. And obviously I can't figure that out because I can't speak to Loren right now. But I think so often kind of when I hear about the time management and how to help kids, oftentimes it does kind of start with because certain things have been noticed in advance that have either more challenges or things that aren't necessarily working so well. So I think to start, it's really setting realistic expectations for yourself and your kid as far as what it is that can and would be done. And so when it comes to if you're going to be gone working or just out of the house in general, I think first and foremost, it's knowing that your kid may not work to the same efficiency that you may have wanted them to while you were home, but they're still going to work. And so it's helping them to understand that this is part of growing up and being responsible. So let's say they are in high school and they're getting close to getting a driver's license. It's being able to have that conversation and letting them know, hey, look, this is an example of responsibility. If I can't leave for a day, or not a day, sorry, if I can't leave for the day to go to work and trust that you're going to take care of your school responsibilities, how can I trust that when I give you the keys of the car and you get your license, that you're going to be equally as safe behind the wheel? You know, and so it opens the door to have some really good conversations just about school and academics, but also just the real world on top of it. But then I also think too, like that is a time where you can use incentives. So for younger kids who might be in middle school or even newer high school students who might be more easily distracted because everything is new. And again, with the virtual learning, there is a lot of downtime where you might get distracted and all of a sudden like be doing activity and forget, oh shoot, I'm supposed to be in class right now, and get back on. So it's helping them to, one, have a visual calendar that they can see and remind themselves. But I also think there's that piece of reminding them that they have certain resources they can reach out and connect with. So whether it's a family friend, they can ask for help if they get stuck on a technical issue, or if they can reach you at work, you know, that they can reach out to you and ask for help if they need it. And so it's creating a plan, again, that they feel comfortable with and you feel comfortable with, but also being flexible that the first time around might be a learning experience where you come home and not much work was done. You know, and so instead of yelling at your kid, why didn't you do this? It's being able to say like, hey, like what happened? You know, really then learn both of you what got in the way. So that way the next time around when you aren't going to be able to be home, you guys can really kind of use that past experience and say, okay, hey, look, here's what we learned from last time. Let's do this differently. Let's see what happens. So a little bit of that trial and error, especially as we start off this first month or so, is going to be key. Because again, for every kid, every family, it's not cookie cutter.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I think that'll go a long way for a lot of families. In the video itself that we made where we interviewed the students, one student had a very specific and poignant question. It is by Liz. It's her first year of college, and this is how she's starting it. So she asks, how do we handle anxiety during this time, and how do we handle intrusive thoughts?
I think I can start that one off, Victoria. I think, you know, for that, it's a great opportunity to potentially seek help. You know, it's to me, I think what I would look at is accessing support systems. So, you know, looking at my family, my close friends that I may have, and reaching out to them and talking about some of those things that I'm feeling, some of the anxious feelings, some of the intrusive thoughts. And if it's something that is needed or merited, you know, I would ask the question, is it time to maybe seek professional help from individuals like Evan or myself, you know, therapists in the community? One of the great things that's happening right now is access to telehealth. We have seen a significant shift in our field as far as access to care and being able to see clients up and down the California coast. So it's a huge difference in the sense of where before clients only had access to their local community, if you will, because that's where clinicians were. Telehealth wasn't really a thing pre-pandemic. It was available, but certainly not to the extent it is today. So I think what's important is, in a situation as that question is describing, when is the time where I maybe say, you know, I want to talk to someone? A great person to always consult, and we recommend this all the time to clients. If it's a student who is still seeing their pediatrician, it's a great opportunity to speak with their pediatrician. As for an adult, it's a great opportunity to speak with your general practitioner, or, you know, an urgent care minute clinic, or what have you. Not everybody knows necessarily to call a clinician when those thoughts occur. And it doesn't mean that you need to, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to still seek professional advice from people who are trained to know how to reach out for help, especially for, depending on where she is going to school. The universities in general have wonderful counseling centers that are still accessible during this time. My understanding is they are doing telehealth as well. So that's another opportunity that I would encourage her to seek if that is something she feels that she needs.
And I think to kind of add to that, I think it's also kind of recognizing, are these intrusive thoughts, is this anxiety new, or is this an exacerbated form of something you've been feeling for a while? And again, do that kind of self-inventory and self-check-in to really kind of get an idea of, was there a specific stimulus that triggered this feeling? You know, is it something that was triggered by on the day you went back to school? Was that something that was a part of it? And then also trying to kind of look at what things you can reframe. So a lot of times with the intrusive thoughts, a lot of times it's a negative narrative that we are creating ourselves that maybe rooted in fact, maybe not. And so it is important at those times to kind of take that step back, whether it's doing a deep breathing exercise, a meditation, something just trying to ground yourself in the present moment. So then you can kind of step back a little bit more objectively and look at the negative things you might be telling yourself and seeing if you can reframe them to a place that is more positive. So if it is the worry of, I'm at a new university campus in a new dorm, and, you know, half of my, you know, friends that I just met just got quarantined because of the pandemic, that's going to create a lot of anxiety. And so, like Todd just mentioned, it is important to reach out to family support systems, friend support systems, but also utilizing campus and local resources as well. And so I know, like in our local school district, you know, you can reach out to the school counselors and get connected with individuals if it's something that, say, is more school related, or just in general, not sure if it's worth bringing up and talking to somebody. A great place for those who have kids that are in elementary, middle, and high school, if you're not sure if your kid could benefit from talking to a therapist, is checking in with the school counselor or somebody that you guys do trust, who also, like a pediatrician, knows your kid pretty well. And so that way then, no matter what, you're going to get some resource and some form of information.
Thank you. Really good feedback. Again, I think this is going to be so helpful to a lot of families in our community. Thank you. In interviewing some of the students, we found that some students were experiencing their friends and peers coming to them with issues that haven't happened before. So friends who haven't had mental health struggles suddenly coming to their friends with severe depression or severe anxiety or severe mental health struggles. And the young people asked me, what do I say to them? What do I say to somebody struggling? Do you have anything you can advise us on that matter?
I mean, I think I'll start with just kind of, sometimes it's not what you say, but rather it's the space you create. Being able to create that space so that way they can talk and really lend, you lend your ear and your heart with some compassion to really try to empathize with where they're coming from. But really it does start with just kind of not focusing on what you can say in response to make them feel better, but rather really listen to see what it is that you can hear that they might need. And then being able to ask that question, hey, how can I best support you? What is it you may need? For some individuals, they may need just to vent and get off their chest. Others may want you to give them a step-by-step solution as far as how to fix it.
I think also one of the things I talk a lot about with my teenagers is language and how we use it and how we define it, because I see often, especially, in the teenagers I work with, they'll come into a session and, oh my gosh, I am severely depressed and I have severe anxiety and I have severe trauma. But then as we discuss and we talk more, it's really determined that those are not the things they're experiencing. And potentially it's something different. But I think what's important, Victoria, is making sure that when we are talking about our feelings, that we really try to explain them in the best way we seem possible. I often feel that, in the kids that I work with, it almost seems like they have to say severe depression, because I think they feel when they say that, then people listen. And that's something that I think is important as adults as well, parents and teachers, that also when we hear our kids say those phrases, even again, asking them, what does that look like for you? Because severe, when I think of a client who's severely depressed or severely anxious, their functioning is not going to necessarily be what I would classify clinically as normal. So in other words, if I see a kid who will claim that, but then, for example, I ask about their report card and they've had straight A's for the last 3 years, it's kind of that trigger for me as a clinician of like, okay, help me understand that. I hear you're severely depressed, but yet you have these amazing grades and you're doing beautifully and you're in all these extracurriculars. So I think what's important is also making sure, most importantly, is that if a person is insinuating those types of phrases, that they are, that it is reviewed by a professional, because is it in fact what they are saying? Is it real? Because I think we often, these are the cases that we sometimes miss, that we hear a student say that I am depressed, but for us, it doesn't visually look like depression, so we let it go, but then it in fact can turn into something far more severe. So I think it's always worth posing that open-ended question of when we hear a student say, I feel sad today, I feel depressed, I feel severely anxious. Tell me more about that. What does that look like for you? And that's a great way of parents and teachers to also be able to really figure out, is it at a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, or is it actually, a 4? Is it something that can be handled just in that moment? And I think going back to also what Evan said previously, is it a new behavior, or is it something that's been ongoing, that maybe it was mild, but now it's moderate, and it's kind of moving more towards severe? So all of those factors are going to be important to consider.
Thank you, Todd. I see a question in the comments that I would like to ask. It says, I know a lot of child abuse is reported by teachers in classrooms, and now there are no teachers in the classrooms. And can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, I think we can definitely talk about it. I don't know if necessarily there's a question kind of posed in that. I think really what that statement typically speaks to is, yes, as mandated reporters, therapists, teachers, counselors, they are going to pick up the signs of what may be suspected child abuse and make the necessary reports. So I know whether it's, on the news, TV, whatever have you, that's been a very kind of big topic that keeps being put out there. And so again, without a specific question about it, I would just kind of say, I think, yes, it's a very real thing, but that also doesn't mean that all families are not safe. It doesn't mean that all kids aren't safe because they're not at school for teachers to see things. The reality is for us as therapists and teachers as well, we're not investigators. So oftentimes why it seems like we make a lot of the reports is because any sort of inkling that does hit the threshold that we're concerned about, we are going to report, be it for the safety of the kid involved, the minor involved. So I do think sometimes there's a little bit of that confusion as far as what mandated reporters do and when they act. It isn't always just this, oh, a kid shows up to a school with a black eye, they go report it. Oftentimes it's very subtle, and it is things that teachers are just suspecting. And a lot of times it goes unfounded, and it'll still be reported as something that be counted rather as something that's been reported, and it may not necessarily directly correlate to a case. But I will say, like 100%, there are a lot of child abuse cases that I'm sure are going unreported because kids are in an environment where mandated reporters are, speaking up and addressing it.
I think also, to me, I think it's an area where we underestimate kids. While there is the often in school settings, mandated reports are made often just because of the fact that there is visual contact of kids, and there's also self-report of kids. I think that we forget that teachers still create pretty amazing relationships with kids, and it's, even though it is virtual, remember always that students, still have access to their previous teachers in a lot of ways. Maybe not necessarily at the elementary level, but certainly at the middle and high school level. I think that, it doesn't mean mandated reporting doesn't happen. I think one of the changes that I've seen, especially as a clinician and working with the clinicians I work with in the various communities, is mandated reporting actually looks very different today, solely because we do have a visual of home, where previously when we were in a school setting or a therapy setting, we only had to hear what was told to us, if you will, where now today, it's a whole different story in the sense of, oh my gosh, that's the living room that Todd always describes in session. So there's more of a visual applied to it, which, in working with a few of the teachers I was working with at the end of last school year, that was something that was a very new experience for them, because they're used to self-report versus all of a sudden getting to see their students' home lives. So it's, it doesn't mean, I think going back to, as Evan shared, it doesn't mean that mandated reporting is not happening. And as we definitely know, for the work I do specifically a lot in Los Angeles County, we do know that DCFS is still actively, actively assessing mandated reports that are made by all types of professionals. So.
And I think just kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, this goes for any sort of kind of domestic case, if you will. It's really making sure for, the kids out there to, have a strong support system, and be open to communicating things with friends and family. So if something doesn't feel right, or if you do feel like you're in a situation that doesn't feel safe, feeling comfortable exploring that with a friend and talking with somebody about it, especially if there's a trusted adult that you can kind of go to. Because kind of like what Todd was saying earlier is, we can sit and speculate on this talk as much as we want as far as what certain circumstances and situations are. But if you can model for your kid how to communicate and how to verbalize things, whether it's at home or socially with friends online, no matter where it's coming from, things that are making them uncomfortable, feel unsafe, that is a huge start. That's a huge key component, is being able to kind of communicate, that doesn't make me feel safe. That's not right for me. I need this to stop. And really helping kids to find their voice. And understand too that their voice is very powerful. And so really kind of knowing and teaching that along the way too.
I would add as well that there are different ways today to report child abuse than there would have been years ago. There's so many hotlines out there that are not just calling children's services for either Los Angeles or Ventura County. There are amazing things out there where, kids can text and do all different kinds of options. So that's something as well to consider of how, can a child do something about it and be able to have that voice, as Evan was saying. And I think there are several avenues that a student can take as far as reaching out to either a professional or seeking some of these hotlines that are available.
Thank you. I think it's important to talk about, both sides of the spectrum, like the throwing confetti and vacuuming, but also like with families that aren't throwing confetti in all the metaphors and physical senses of that. So I appreciate you exploring that very real topic with us. We're approaching the very end of our hour and 15. So I want to open it up to final thoughts about returning to school, final virtual well wishes, final lights to hang on to, especially you, Amy. I've missed you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Amy, were you vacuuming?
I was. I just stepped out for a minute to do a little vacuuming. I'm back now. It looks good. I could take you on a tour and show you.
I think what I would add just as a close is, we are all in this together. And I think what's important to consider in this situation, and I think with, I've been practicing therapy for about 7 years now as a clinician. And I think what's important to consider is that for the first time, while all of us have different backgrounds, we come from different educational statuses, socioeconomic statuses, different cultures, different religions, different orientations, we're all experiencing this, whether, no matter what team we play for, if you will. And I think it's important to consider that, as we go through this, we we keep that as a perspective, and we use that as also a friendly reminder of, Victoria, kind of what came to my mind with what you just said is that we can easily forget that, I come from a family that can purchase a computer for each of my kids. Not all families are going to have that experience or be able to provide that experience. And I think it's important that we recognize that and that we're humble. So that's what I would say to close.
Well, definitely. I think just to kind of add to what Todd is saying, I think, I definitely would want to close with this piece of really just be kind to yourselves just as you would other people, really understand that this is a time and a place where there is so much uncertainty and so much unknown and so much going on that all of us are being flooded with emotions, thoughts, feelings, information that maybe we haven't been faced with before. And so it's being able to kind of take that step back and, remind yourself, like, we are all human, we're all kind of experiencing this for the first time together. Certain things, are big and in the news and in all of our social media and in our face all the time. And for some people, it's not knowing, how do I react to the pandemic? How do I react to social change? And not knowing is okay. And so it is just reminding yourselves that we're human. And as long as you're open to growing or being willing to grow, that's the biggest piece, because none of us are perfect. And so moving forward, I hope we kind of continue more of these talks and kind of explore what the present normal is. Things are consistently changing and it is so uncertain, but if we stay present, the normal of right now is something we're all adapting to. And I think it's just kind of, and it sounds like it's just more of like out there, but it's really simple. It's just this idea of we have to have compassion for ourselves and others and be willing to come to the table with some humility and understanding that in this time and in this space, there's only so much we as individuals can do, but together we really can do so much to not only make kids feel safe entering school in this during this pandemic, or just navigating social aspects of life that they are kind of seeing and being exposed to for the first time for some individuals, others for too long, and again, repeatedly feeling like, this is too much, I can't handle it. So just knowing that, hey, we can support each other and it may not look the same for each of us, but as long as we're open and trying, that's really key.
And I think for me, I think I've really found, it kind of hit me 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. I think we're like 5 months into it now, that the two things that I think that I've really kind of grasped onto are, one is the simplicity of things. Like it's kind of forced us back into that life of being simple. So I've gotten rid of a lot of the stuff in my life where I know that we overdid things or we spent too much time on things. And I'm really just enjoying the simple things. Like I go back to Todd saying, having lunch with your family, just something simple as that has just been so great for myself and my family. And I think I realized for me personally, what I really enjoy, what I look forward to now, and I recognize that I need to be around people that are willing to talk about it and admit that this is a struggle, and it's a struggle for all of us. And every time I get on a conversation with Evan and Todd, and even with you, Victoria, when I get the opportunity to have you on a call, I always feel so much better when I hang up, because you just make me feel like I'm not, that we're all in this together. This is normal. We're going to get through this, but we have to be willing to talk about it, and we have to be willing to support each other. So I want to thank the two of you and Victoria for putting this all together. But thank the two of you for listening to us and making us feel better.
Well,
and giving us hope.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
I knew I wanted you back for a reason.
Right?
Friends, that brings us to our time. It's 8:45. We want to leave you with positive energy and the idea that you will get through it. It's going to be okay. The spokesperson, Marina, who I interviewed, is 6 and going into 1st grade. And I made her end her interview with big, strong muscles. Panelists, come on. Let's see it. Big strong muscles. Yeah. All right. Thank you, BRITE. Thank you, Catherine, our executive director. Thank you, all of our panelists and our entire BRITE staff. We appreciate all of you. Thank you, Mitch, for being behind the scenes. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everybody.